Welcome back to Candid Corporate Conversations. I am Kanisha Hart, creator and founder of Confident You, and I am super excited to talk with you ladies for the second time. This is our second installment about what we deal with in corporate America candidly. So we're going to dive right in. Really quickly, I will say the very first installment of Candid Corporate Conversations happened last week. You can find it on my YouTube page at K Hart, or you can find it on my Facebook page at my name, which is Kaneshi Hart, Hart, Kanisha Hart. And so find it, review it, drop me notes, comments, let me know what you think. And then today we're going to talk about a separate second subject, and we're going to focus on prioritization. So let's get into it. So why I wanted to talk about prioritization is because in corporate America, it's so important for us to prioritize what is important in order for us to move the needle on our goals, in order for us to move the needle on our corporate careers. And I think everybody would agree with that. And so there's two categories that everything falls into. It's either important or it's urgent, right? And we have to determine where in the spectrum and in the sphere things lie in those two areas. And we're going to talk about four categories that incorporate those two and how we prioritize based on those four categories. And so first and foremost, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because in addition to the fact that prioritization is so important in moving our careers, I wanted us to be really candid about what holds us back from effectively prioritizing. Because what it does when we don't prioritize is we feel overwhelmed. We are drained by the work that we're doing because we feel like we're in this whirlwind of going through the day, being busy, doing things. But at the end of the day, looking back and saying, what did I really accomplish? What did I get done? Has anybody had a day like that? I've had several. And so want to break that habit, want to break that cycle. Prioritizing helps to do that. Sometimes we feel like we're swimming against the current, just working so hard, but we're not getting anywhere. We're just barely keeping our head above water. That's because we're dealing with things that seem urgent, things that are important, but they aren't really actually moving us forward. And humans need progress. We need to feel like we are progressing, accomplishing things in order to feel like we have a win on a daily basis that energizes us to tackle the next day to get another win. So prioritization creates progress, and that's why it's so important in our corporate careers. Anything we do, but we're talking about our corporate careers here. So, based on things falling into the category of important or urgent, there are four quadrants that everything can fall into and does fall into. When it comes to prioritization, we're going to talk through those, but to just introduce them really quickly. First, you have the urgent and important quadrant or category. Then you have the non-urgent and important category. Next, you have urgent and not important. And lastly, you have not urgent and not important. So let's talk about what each of those represent. First, urgent and important. Those are the crises. Items that are happening immediately, need to get done. They are important and they have to get done now. We all know what they are. They're situations that pop up quickly. With what we're dealing with right now, with the coronavirus and everything that's going on, then those things are probably popping up a lot more in some of your lives and in some of our industries where we're moving on a dime, we're changing things, we're adapting to the rapidly changing environment that we're living in and how it's impacting different industries in your work. And so those meetings that weren't on the books this morning but are now on the books this afternoon, that's urgent and important. That deadline that suddenly popped up yesterday that needs to be taken care of and met today, that's urgent and important, right? Those pressing problems, those crises that happen because a problem has now fallen apart, urgent and important. The fires that you have to put out, some of them fall into the urgent and important category. So we can't get around it. We can't get away from those, but we can minimize them. I will tell you, sometimes our urgent and important category is brought on by our own lack of preparedness and our own procrastination. What happens is we know that we have something due. We do other stuff or we allow ourselves to get caught up in other stuff, distractions or interruptions. and then it gets down to 2 days before the deadline or 3 days before the deadline. Now what was important, needed to be done, becomes urgent and important, has to be done immediately or very quick turnaround. And that creates stress and strain. And so in this category can cause us to be stressed and can drain us because we're having to turn around on a dime on so much, and we just can't sustain that on a regular basis. And so how do you minimize this? We minimize this by prioritizing, planning, and delegating. Also by putting in systems in place and processes that will help to eliminate things becoming urgent that are important. Now, it's not going to cover everything. You're going to have those unplanned meetings and those crises that pop up and those fires that you have to put out, but there are some things that you can minimize and some things you can delegate. So what I would encourage you to do is over the next week, if that's too long, take 3 days. And I want you to write down everything that pops up that you feel like you urgently have to do and that's important to do. Just write it all down. Don't analyze it. Don't put details beside it. Just write it all down. You'll know what it is when you go back to look at the list. And then after a week, I want you to analyze. First of all, were these things really urgent and important? Second of all, who else could have done them for you? Third of all, or not done them for you, but would have been better suited to do it, right? Like maybe has a skill set that would have allowed them to do it much more quickly than you were able to do, right? There's a number of reasons why we delegate. And third, were there any systems or processes that you could have put in place to help eliminate it becoming an urgent problem? You put the system in place because it's important, but it only became urgent because it didn't get done in the time frame that it could have gotten done with long-term planning. So that's the way that we identify, first, quadrant prioritizing urgent and important, knowing what it is, and then how do we minimize spending time there? Because the second quadrant, the second category is where we really want to spend most of our time, and that is in the non-urgent and important. This is your goals and your planning stage. This is where the goals for the year, the goals for the quarter, the goals for the month, the goals for the week, these are where these items lay. And they are important to moving your business, which is important to your success, which is important to the corporate ladder that you may want to climb. And even if you don't want to climb it, you want to be successful in your role, right? So there's important things that need to be done. And this is where it's not urgent, but it's important, and you want to spend the majority of your time. These are the large goals, like we talked about for the year. These are the major projects that are going on for the year or for the quarter. And this is where you want to spend the bulk of your time making sure that you're doing activities that will get those done, but doing them in a time frame that allows you to double check your work, recheck your work, measure, make sure that as you move toward the finish line, it's going to be a seamless finish. Not hurried, not inaccurate, it's going to be on point. Oftentimes, what happens that we don't work in this category is we fail to plan to work in this category. And we know that when we fail to plan, we plan to fail. So you want to make sure that you're scheduling time on your calendar to work on the things that are important. Block out time. We often say, it's on my to-do list, I know that I need to get it done. But how often have you had meetings dropped on your calendar because you have open space available and people say, hey, I need to talk to you? Well, if you've already blocked that time off to handle the important items that you know are going to move the business, then that time is sacred. That time is non-negotiable, and you have planned to act on the things that need to be done to address the important goals that you have. Just to make sure that we tackle everything that's important, I want to put into your spirit 2 other things that fall into this important category. In addition to tasks and activities that have to be done, relationship building is one. So it's very important to build relationships, and women are great at that, right? That just comes with the territory. We are better at that as a whole, typically, than men. And so building relationships is important because that relationship currency, that relationship credibility in the corporate environment is so important. We get so much more done. We get tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, can you work on this when we have that relationship currency built and credibility built. And so you want to make sure that you are scheduling time, being intentional about relationship building. That's important. That falls into this prioritization category. Also planning. Again, like I said, we put in our to-do list, but do we really plan to spend time doing what's important? Or have we planned what needs to be done? Do we have time to plan so that we do not fail, right? In order to move the needle where we need to. So you want to spend as much time in this category, non-urgent, but important as possible, because that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck and the return on your investment of your time. The third category or quadrant is urgent but not important. So these things consist of interruptions from your coworkers who want to stop by and chit chat, complain, water cooler talk, whatever we want to call it, that's not helping to move the business forward. It's just an interruption. Unnecessarily checking your email. I am a proponent, a believer that you schedule time to check your email. Schedule time in the morning when you come in, not the very first thing you come in when you come in, but it may be after the first 30 minutes. You have a scheduled 30 minutes to go through emails from the previous day. Then you have a time at lunch to catch anything from the morning, and then you have a time at the end of the day before you wrap up. And so that way you're not distracted, interrupted by emails that are coming in during the day, and you can actually focus on the things that are in the quadrant we just talked about previously, important. But those are what urgent but not important things are. Also, other people interrupting you or unimportant meetings that you have to go to. I say unimportant meetings because how many of you have been in a meeting where your team member or your colleague or your manager were in the meeting and you're not actually contributing to make a decision in that meeting? You're just there to be there to get the information and hear it firsthand. Anybody been there? I have. Those are meetings that you can skip. Talk to your manager, talk to your colleague, share the effort to say, if you go to this meeting, I'll go to this one, we'll share notes. But that eliminates an interruption into your workday for something that's not important because you're just there to get information. And so you can be using your time elsewhere to do something that's important, moving your goals ahead, and not being interrupted by things that are not important. But meetings get dropped on a calendar and people think that they're urgent. Make that list. So as we talked about in the first one, make a list of those things and then determine, are they really as urgent as they seem? Because they're not important. How can I maneuver so that I don't have to deal with this? So the way that we minimize time in this category, because that's what we want to do, is we want to learn to say no and learn to delegate. No is a sentence all by itself. It is okay to say no. Now in corporate America, we try to be a little kinder in how we say no. And so you may say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. It's just not feasible with what I have on my plate. Or no, I'm not going to be able to make that meeting. It's not conducive with the schedule of things that I've got going on. But be okay with saying no. And people will learn to respect that. And they will also understand that you are prioritizing what's important, because when they see your results from working mostly in quadrant 2, the non-urgent but the important category, then they will understand, okay, Suzanne is working on X, Y, and Z, and we see the results from that, so we want her to continue to work on that, right? And then also delegate. So if it's urgent, it may need to be taken care of, right? But if it's not important, know again who to delegate that to. And so you don't want to delegate things that don't have to be done. So again, determine how important it really is. If it's not important, then does it really even need to be delegated? But if it is, delegate it because it's urgent, so it has to be taken care of. Figure out who your go-to players are for that so that you can move that work into those who can better handle it so that you're free to do what you need to do. And then the fourth category, non-urgent and non-important. These are straight distractions. We know what these are. These are time we spend on our social media, time we spend on phone calls that are not necessary for us to take. They're not helping us in our business or moving the business. These are, again, irrelevant conversations or irrelevant emails that we're getting that are strictly informational that we don't need to read, and we don't need the information, but we get them because we're part of the distribution list. Those are all distractions. They are not moving the needle on what you need to do in order to reach your goals. And so eliminate those. Minimize. This is the area where we want to minimize the most time, but this takes a little bit of discipline. right? Because a lot of the times we're distracted unconsciously, right? How normal is it for us to pick up our phone, and just pop up in the Facebook really quickly, and then 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, we realize, oh, okay, I should go back to work, right? That's a distraction. That time adds up during the day. It's not important and it's not urgent. So how do we get rid of it? Just a little tip: pick up your cell phone now, move your Facebook and your Instagram and whatever other social media apps you have that are on the very first page of your cell phone pages, the slide, move them over to the third page or the last page. So you actually have to intentionally go swipe the faces of your phone in order to get to that page to go to your social media. Those little things help, right? To eliminate us from doing things that are really distractions. Put rules in your email box so that when emails come in that are not important, that are not urgent, that you really don't need, or that's information that if you read it this week or next week, it's still the same information. It doesn't change your business. Put rules into your email box so that those go to a folder. And then you can set time in your calendar once every 2 weeks to go through that folder, or once a week you take an hour to go through that folder. But that eliminates the distractions, because we know if it pops in, we want to read it. And if you have 10 of those pop in a day and it takes you a minute and a half to 2 minutes to read each one of them, you've now wasted 20 minutes doing things that are not really helping you, right? So remove those things, because ultimately when we work and spend time in the quadrants where it's not important, it's not urgent, and even the urgent and important quadrant, those things drain us because we're using energy that we don't see is actually getting us any further ahead than what we really want to be. So to recap, crises are in the urgent and important category. Goals and planning are in the non-urgent but important category, where you want to spend most of your time. Interruptions are your urgent but not important items, that quadrant, and distractions, not important, not urgent category. So those are the four categories to use to prioritize your time. And so in using those, I encourage you, challenge you over the rest of this week, the next 3 days. Write down, as I said in the very first one, write down everything that you do and keep track of it. And then go back and say, this is where I would put these in these 4 quadrants. And then what can I get rid of? Write that out. What can I delegate? Write that out. What am I just not going to do? Quick example. How many of you have a to-do list that you have, let's just say, 12 things on? And every day, the last 7 of those 12 get transferred to the next day's to-do list. And then that day, you transfer those same 7 to the to-do list for the next day. And then you do the same thing the day after that. And those 7 things transfer on that to-do list every day for about 2 weeks, maybe even 3, before you realize this one's already been done. Somebody else did it. This doesn't need to be done. It's too late to do this one now because the situation has already passed. Those are all unimportant and non-urgent, and seeing them on your list and not achieving them just makes you feel like, I'm a failure. I never have enough time in my day. That is draining. I have been there. Stop doing that to yourself. Remove those things from your list. Identify the important and the urgent and important. Those things, top 6. If you can get it down to 4, 3 would be better. But if you can get it between 4 and 6, that is your to-do list for the day. Everything else needs to either be delegated or it's just not going to be done because it's not going to move the needle. But it eliminates us feeling like we are incomplete at the end of each day and like we just can't get it together, because you are together. You are handling and juggling a million things, and you are great at what you do in your corporate America world. And so own that and stop setting yourself up to say, I'm not finishing my list of 12 and I'm continually moving 7 over. That makes us feel like we're just not good enough or we're just not there. You are. So learn to prioritize those things. Get rid of the non-important, non-urgent. Delegate the urgent but not important. And spend your time on the urgent and important, and most of your time in that important category. And you will be propelling yourself by prioritizing and making progress. Quick tip. We as humans thrive on feeling progressive. Don't you feel good when you make progress towards something, when you finish a task and you know that that's going to move the needle on your bigger goal? Don't we feel good? It's a small win. And you want to add those up because that's what energizes us to go for the next one and the next one and the next day to continue going. So give yourself the wins that you deserve by prioritizing so that you can accomplish those things that you prioritize. Feel progressive because you are, and that's going to propel you in your career. Make this part of your daily planning, your weekly planning. Designate your work into these categories, and I promise you, you will feel more control of your day, of your week, of your month, of your future, and of your career. Thank you for joining me for Candid Corporate Conversations today. I'll see you guys next time.